Welcome to my second lecture on the Weimar Republic. Why did it fail? Today we are going to examine the first 4 years of the Weimar Republic to understand why it was placed under pressure. In the last lecture, I spoke about how the Weimar Republic was built on rocky foundations. If you build a house on rocky foundations, any amount of pressure can force it to collapse. This usually comes from stormy weather. If we consider this metaphor, it is certainly true to say that the Weimar Republic faced a number of storms, and it is actually quite surprising that the government did not collapse under this pressure in its first 4 years. Before we begin, let us consider 3 key factors that help to identify why the Weimar Republic was under so much pressure. Firstly, they faced political pressure, mostly from extremist parties who look to use violence to overthrow the government. Secondly, there is economic pressure, relating to the wealth of the country, since Germany is bankrupt after losing World War I. Thirdly, there are social pressures. Social pressure comes in the form of votes for representatives in the Reichstag from the ordinary people. The way people vote is determined by political and economic factors, which is why I have summarized this as to mean the mood of the people. This lecture will be split into 4 parts. We will first examine the difference between internal pressure, from within Germany, and external pressure, from outside of Germany. Then we will look at the ideologies of extremist parties and their attempts to overthrow Weimar. Thirdly, we will examine the consequences of the reparations bill following the Treaty of Versailles. Finally, we will connect the reparations bill to the disastrous events of 1923 and the invasion of the Ruhr. Let us imagine that this circle represents Germany. The W in the middle represents the Weimar Republic. Internal pressure comes from within the country itself. This comes in the form of extremist parties and social discontent. External pressure is the pressure that comes from outside of Germany. This comes from the state of the global economy and from the way in which Germany is treated by the Allied powers who won World War I. This map shows Germany split up into many different regions. Germany was only formed in 1871, and so it is a relatively young country. Before this, each of these regions were independent nations. This is a bit like how the UK has England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. However, on a larger and more complex scale, each of these regions had their own sense of identity and different needs. Some wanted to become a separate nation again following Germany's humiliating defeat in World War I. If I can draw your attention to Bavaria in the south, this is a large region, with a strong sense of identity. This is where the Nazi Party was first formed. This is a slightly different map. It shows Germany and all the pieces of land that were taken away and given to neighboring countries. These areas equated to 10% of Germany's land mass. If I can draw your attention to the highlighted section to the northeast. This is called the Polish Corridor, and it was used to split up Germany's most powerful region of Prussia. This meant those living in what is now East Prussia were cut off from the rest of Germany. The small green area of land is Danzig. This was an important trade port that was taken away, causing even further economic harm. The map also shows how Eastern Europe has now split into smaller countries, when before it had formed the large Austro-Hungarian Empire. This means that Germany is largely landlocked with lots of new neighbors, alongside the old enemy neighbor of France. This places further external pressure on Germany. Extremist parties are political parties that hold extreme ideologies. Many chose to use violent methods to try and overthrow the Weimar government. However, some sought a slower and more legitimate method, by gaining seats in the Reichstag. Due to proportional representation, many extreme parties did gain seats, even if they were only a few. This helped them build up their power base and undermine Weimar from within. In the long term, this is how the Nazi Party gained power. This continuum line will help to explain the difference between right and left-wing ideologies. I've used the Soviet Union symbol to represent left wing because this is the name of Russia under communist rule. The communists gained control over Russia in 1917 using violence, and the Weimar government had genuine fears that this would happen in Germany too. The main ideology of communism centers around the concept of equality. Nobody should own property because this leads to differences in personal wealth. Therefore, the state owns and controls everything. On the opposite side, right-wing extremists believe that society should have a strict hierarchy. Since Germany had been an absolute monarchy until the Kaiser abdicated at the end of World War I, this was an ideology that many conservatives still believed in. For those of you who study Macbeth, it is not too dissimilar to the Great Chain of Being from Elizabethan times. Right-wing extremists were also fixated on military glory. They believed Germany was the best country, despite their loss in the war, and were willing to believe conspiracy theories that Germany had been betrayed by the new leaders of the Weimar Republic. This is called the stab in the back theory. Weimar had a genuine fear of a military coup against their authority. This is what happened in Italy under Mussolini in 1920, establishing his fascist dictatorship. The Nazi Party is a right-wing group, but actually started out with left-wing ideologies about workers' rights. When you look at both far sides of these extremes, there are some remarkable similarities. Both communist Russia and fascist Italy abolished democracy and freedom of speech. They used propaganda and state control of the media to keep opposition in check. This makes the two regimes remarkably similar. This is why, in some ways, it's better to see this continuum as a circle. The first violent challenge to the Weimar Republic came in January 1919, only 3 months after the armistice was signed, ending World War I. This was a violent uprising by a militant communist group called the Spartacists, centered in the capital of Berlin. The Spartacists especially targeted the newspaper press officers, showing how important part of their strategy was control of the media. President Ebert used a paramilitary organization called the Freikorps to put down the revolt. These were all ex-soldiers who arrived home to face redundancy from the official army, so formed a paramilitary, unofficial, army. Instead, they were able to take back control of Berlin but through violent means. Female leader of the Spartacists Rosa Luxemburg was murdered and her body thrown into the river. The next challenge came, rather ironically, from the Freikorps, in March 1920. This is because all paramilitary groups had been given official orders to disband and disarm due to the military restrictions placed on Germany under the Treaty of Versailles. An army general called Wolfgang Kapp led the Freikorps to perform a military coup. He succeeded in taking control of Berlin. President Ebert did not have a strong enough official army to put down the Freikorps, so instead told the workers to go on a general strike. This shut the capital city down, and after a few days Wolfgang Kapp was forced to flee. Many members of the Freikorps laid down their arms, but only joined other paramilitary groups later down the line, including the Nazi brownshirts. The main external pressure on Germany came in the form of the Treaty of Versailles. I am going to focus here on the reparations bill of £6.6 billion. This was used to repair the damage that Germany caused to the French and Belgian economy, and to pay widow pensions in all victorious countries. However, it placed Germany in a debt trap. This means Germany had to pay too much of their GDP to the Allied countries in debt, so could not invest it back into their own economy. This political cartoon by David Lowe shows the problem well. Unlimited indemnity simply means unlimited debt. This is represented as a huge pile of manure that weighs down the cart. The horse is clearly too weak to pull the cart. This represents how Germany cannot grow their own economy while they are weighed down by the reparation debt. The two men represent the Allied powers, who are eager for their money. The caption shows, in an ironic way, that the Allies were aware of the problem. Germany cannot pay back the reparations while their economy remains crippled with debt. Germany, unsurprisingly, failed to pay their first reparations bill. Therefore, the French and Belgium decided to collect the bill in kind. In kind simply means to take the value in natural resources. Coal was Germany's most valuable natural resource because it burns at very high temperatures, so can fuel industrial factories. The French and Belgium targeted the coal-filled area of the Ruhr in the northeast, highlighted on this map. If we zoom this map out, we can see how close the Ruhr is to both the French and Belgian border. The demilitarization of the Rhineland area made this even easier. The Weimar Republic simply did not have the means to militarily defend the area. This results in President Ebert making a fatefully bad decision. He asks the coal-field workers to show passive resistance by going on strike. This meant the economic production in the Ruhr region was completely shut down. However, this also harmed the German economy, and inflation soared. This was made worse when Ebert decided to pay the workers to keep up the strike and printed more money to afford this. This resulted in a complete collapse of the German currency, called hyperinflation. There was a huge social impact of hyperinflation across Germany, as people discovered their savings to be worthless and had to take wheelbarrows of money to the bakery for a loaf of bread. This resulted in social unrest and so further internal pressure on the government, thus showing how external events can have a huge impact on the mood of the people and therefore their voting behavior. Let's go back to our overarching question. Why did the Weimar Republic fail in the years 1919 to 1923? I would open an extended response by discussing both the internal and external pressure they were placed under. I would then explore the concept of extremist ideology by political parties within Germany and give an example of a violent uprising, either the Spartacists or KAP. Thirdly, I would discuss the severity of the reparations bill and how this placed Germany in a debt trap. I would link this then to the events of 1923 and the invasion of the Ruhr. Thank you for listening. Our next lecture will explore the years 1923 to 1929, when Gustav Stresemann made a number of important policies that grew Germany's economy and improved Weimar's reputation on the international stage.